Welcome guys, welcome to this channel. And today what we're going to see is some interview tips because yesterday we attended one interview and I want to share the interview questions with you, mainly for DevOps, AWS DevOps, or you can say DevOps interview. So what are the things we need to know? I mean, this is not very depth or very tough interview, but yes, they asked so many things when it comes to the DevOps part and as well as the AWS part. So the first thing they ask you, tell me some advantages of the container over virtual machine. That's a simple question. That was really very simple question to answer. So the containers are lightweight. You can say that the problem with the with the interviewers, or mainly the people who are the other side of the interview call, is that if you don't speak confidently or don't speak bit loudly, that loudness is bit required. Not very loudly, but yes, the way I'm speaking, the way I'm talking to you, it's something very it shows that I know something. So that is the reason when you talk, be clear, be loud, little bit loud. I mean, not too much loud, but little bit loud. Don't speak in silos, or don't speak very with low pitch and something. So that will help. The first thing they ask is tell me about yourself, and those things after that. The first thing was the advantage of containers over virtual machines. So containers everywhere, in every interview, you will see that containers, Kubernetes containers, then EKS or AKS, how to deploy applications. Those are the main topics that companies are looking for. What do you mean by that? It means that the companies are moving towards cloud, not the infrastructure, but the applications also. But some applications where the challenges, the challenges are there where old applications, like legacy applications, they want to move their applications to the Kubernetes or any place where they can manage those applications in the containerized way, and that's where the real challenge comes. So the first thing is that tell me about the containers and virtual machines. So give them the little bit, not even very much detail, but little bit brief idea about the containers and why the containers. It's a lightweight, basically. It's a loose coupled architecture, which is now it's a hot cake. And definitely the cost point of view, the resource consumption point of view is always low as compared to that. And but the most important thing is that after your 40% of usage in your virtual machines only use 40% of your resources, but containers use more than 80% of your resources. So if you purchase containers and you deploy containers, then there's a guarantee that they will consume the most of the resources. But you're paying for that one, right? The second question was, what do you mean by immutable infrastructure? I mean, in DevOps. So these questions are real world questions, guys. Yesterday during one interview, we helped many people to crack their interview. So we helped one of the guys to crack the interview, and during those interview, the interviewer was asking this question. So he asked this question. So we prepare those people for this kind of interview. So what do you mean by immutable? Immutable infrastructure is a DevOps approach that emphasizes the creation of disposable resources instead of modifying existing one. That's something unique thing about DevOps thing. When you explain those things, immutable architecture means earlier we used to modify so many things. We used to repair, we used to modify. Nowadays it's not like that. If that is the case, then it will be very difficult to release the new version of your software. If you are if you're not a decoupled architecture, if something goes wrong and you're repairing those things, no, it's not going to work. So that is the reason the DevOps architecture, DevOps approach is towards immutable architecture. So what do you mean by immutable architecture? That's something you need to explain. I'll share this document with you guys, so for you. And by the way, if you're really interested to learn and to crack the interview. So learning is for job, and definitely learning is to crack the interviews also. And DevOps is a very vast topic. So many people say that we only cover CI/CD pipeline and then Python and then YAML file, but there are plenty of other things also that is also required. So we'll cover those things in our 25 hours of lecture. But yes, let's go to the next question. What is the basic building blocks of the Docker image? What is the basic to build a Docker image? So definitely Docker file, Docker build, and Docker image. So you need to just mention those things. And what are the basic building blocks of a Docker? Or what's a verb? What's the variable verbs in Docker file? So from, pull, run, CMD. These are the things you need to mention. You need to mention those things in your in your interview. Now the first question regarding the scalable infrastructure in Kubernetes is EKS. How do you manage the scalable infrastructure? So as you know that EKS supports two types of autoscaling. One is a carpenter, and the third one is a cluster autoscaler. The carpenter is a flexible, high performance Kubernetes cluster autoscaler that helps improve application availability and cluster efficiency. So at that side. And the second one is the cluster autoscaler. This is something very it's a cheat sheet, guys. It's a if you consider this document as a whole and soul for DevOps, it's wrong. But it's a cheat sheet. You can, in either way, you can remember it and you can refer it during the interviews. At very high level, what are the steps you take to provision the EKS cluster? This is something very general question they ask. So you go through those things. One is a prerequisite. You need to have a kubectl. You have to have a EKSCTL. Required IAM permissions, create your EKS cluster and nodes, and view the resources and then manage the resources. IAM role, VPCs, security group. These are the things that you need to look into that. So AWS component that needs to be configured in the EKS thing, and existing VPC, kubectl command. These are the things that you need to mention if somebody asks you about the EKS part. And then the Kubernetes part. So the Kubernetes is very, very deep thing. You have a lot of things in Kubernetes that you need to know in order to crack the interview. But basic idea about the Kubernetes is the architecture, which components talk to which components. That's something very important. And we have a separate class, and we have the other video where you can go through those Kubernetes, just architecture. That will help. So we normally create a manifest file, and from manifest file we create the resources. So very high level thing, if you want to deploy an application, the first you create the deployment. The manifest file will create the deployment, and then the second manifest file will create the services. And you can explain those things very well. But the object, when it comes to the object can be like API version, kind, metadata, specs. These are the objects. You can, if somebody asks you in an interview, then while writing the, YAML file, the manifest file, we need to use the objects. And one example, always make sure that you have, make sure that you write those things without any issue. What is a deployment? So Kubernetes orchestration tools of a Docker container. When we have a Docker image, an application, we would like to deploy an application. So first we do the deployment, and first you create the deployment, then you create the service for that deployment, and then end user can access that application using the TCP port by using the cluster IP. What are the benefits of Helm? Helm is the tool that we use to do the maintenance of your manifest file. Then the final question was that what's the difference between the blue and green and the canary deployment? First, understand what is a canary deployment. The canary deployment involves releasing the new version to the small subset of servers and users first, then gradually rolling up to the rest of the users. That's a rolling. I mean, that's a canary deployment. But blue-green means that like you have something called pre-prod, creating a second identical production environment. We call it the pre-prod and the prod. So you install something on pre-prod and then test it, and then by the time the production is still available, and when your test is done on pre-prod, we are okay with that, then or just divert the user's connection or users their direction to the pre-prod instead of prod, and then you can do the prod. So that's called the blue-green deployment. Now, big question about Kubernetes is, when you talk about Kubernetes during interview, make sure that you involve, in a sense, make sure you specify that this is a migration. Migration means application migration from monolith to the microservices. Now, what do you mean by monolith? It's something they might ask you. What do you mean by monolith? So monolith, it's something, one single strange code that will control and that will manage, that we need to manage for entire application. That's a monolith. It's very cumbersome, very risky. Small upgrade, small update. For that, you need to take entire application down. So that's a drawback of a monolith. But when it comes to the microservices, you should be continuously modernizing your organization software. So microservices means it's a decoupled architecture. So you can start with the decomposing monolith application into my microservices. There are many ways to decompose that application. One of the thing is the refactoring. Having said that, refactoring, you can explain them what do you mean by refactoring. So these are the some topics that you need to understand. Use the decomposition pattern. When you say refactoring means, what do you mean by refactoring? There are multiple ways to refactor the application. Decompose the application basically. Based on the business capability, subdomain, then transaction, then team pattern, fig pattern, abstraction pattern. These are the things that you need to mention with the interviewer. So I would rather encourage you to go with one of the video where I mentioned that any new guy who doesn't know anything about migration or application migration, Java in particular, and he attended one call for Java migration, Java monolith migration to the microservices. What are the things he need to understand as a code, as a layman? When you see the code, what are the things comes in mind? What are the things you need to look into that code? So a monolith code is a jungle. It's a big jungle of a code. It's multiple lines. We don't know which line does what. But in microservices, you are breaking those codes into some segment. That segment we can call as a service. The small services, and those services, you are deploying those services, and as a whole you are saying that you are deploying the application. So one application can have multiple services. That's why you call them microservices. As a service, everything as a service. So I hope this you will like this video, and I will be happy to assist you if you have any questions, concern, or you want to learn this AWS DevOps or Azure DevOps. Believe me guys, right from day one, start preparing for your interviews and start getting into the the labs. That's the only way. We'll do that. I hope you will like this video, and we'll catch you soon. And by the way, if you are really interested in the course, then please contact us on 9620 635 166. Thank you.